in your ear. So take it away, Dave and Mackie.
Guess what? This is Shiny Side Out with Dave
and Mackie
on WZZR, coming to you from Australia for Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. It's a place, it's home, it's Marbo, Mackie, it's the vibe to unfiltered ideas and conversations in the chat room. So join us in the chat room because we're here now. You can talk to us while we're on air. And it's also a great place to go and get your merch. This is show number 495.
590 and 400.
So catch us on air, online, and anywhere on your smart device. So grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace Tabletop Digital Radio. If you missed Solaris' show, like I did, I'm going to actually jump into the archives and listen to it a bit later on. But she had Madeline Rudy on from Life in the Hologram. It's always an awesome place. It's always an awesome show. She always has awesome guests, and we love Solaris, and we extend the invitation to her also
we love Solaris.
It's just like almost as much, Mackie, as I love the leader.
The leader. I love him more. I love the leader more. I said it first.
Oh, pardon me. So from what Mackie and I understand, it's kind of free. It's kind of free at the moment to get to the archives. But what you can do is you can support the station in other ways. You can buy a seed pack or, pardon me, I don't have a cough button. But consider myself.
How does the button make you cough?
That's funny. There's a joke about black pepper too, my doctor said. But anyway, I'll leave that alone. And that's what he said. So, where was I? Yes. So there's the archives, but there's Patreon. You can support the station that way. But you know what? If you listen and you maybe you're hearing this for the first time and there's something that sparks your imagination or you're interested, or any other host, any other shows, if you like anything, please contribute to the station because it isn't funded. There is no sponsors, right? Although some hosts can have individual sponsors, just making a call out. But it becomes important because it means that we're not being moderated apart from the American broadcasting requirements where there's no profanity, and the YouTube requirements where we're not providing medical advice and we are not conflicting against the words of the WHO or any local state or federal health system. That's what we're not doing. We're not doing that. But what we are doing is having good educational topics and debates about those topics, and I think that's really important, and it's certainly something we have to do. And this ever-tightening, let's call it an elastic band of autocracy, is tightening. The cable ties are tightening around what is really truth. And there was a brilliant quote, Mackie, about, and I forget who it was. Was it ancient Greek?
Possibly.
Ptolemy or someone who said, that if you remove the tongue of a person, of a liar, I think, right,
yeah.
Or something.
Okay, possibly.
It's not done to stop the lies; it's done to stop the truth.
Oh, yes.
I've paraphrased it so awfully that you can't recognize it anymore. But but to be honest, I think it's still pertinent today. So the more autocracy there is, the more they dislike truth because it goes against their narrative. And do we want that? Probably not. If we could fight out against what we thought we had as free speech, but then it ends up that's not quite the case. You can't talk openly about anything, really. Yeah, and we're in this panopticon where we're all having to self-police ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So taking that into consideration, and just pausing on that, we're going to park that, we're going to box it up, we'll unpack it a bit later. Meccy and I, we're in Australia, and therefore we're on lands that their traditional custodians used to curate, probably a nice way of putting it. And where I live, it's the Darkanul. And Meccy, where you are?
Yeah, I'm is the Rock people.
Yeah, and I've been down at Pemulwuy quite a bit, or there in that area in the Direct people, and for the hospital visits, family issues. So anyway, I'm back at home again. Hopefully, just done a shift change, and as such, Meccy and I wholeheartedly and with humility pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. And I do dare say that if you're anywhere in the world, you may be the first peoples, and there we salute you. But if you're not, if you're the successful invasion people, right, that moved in and took their lands from them, or cohabited, or whatever you think is the right terminology, do pay respects to them, because you know what? If we had no electricity, if suddenly all the electrons went on strike, and I'm sure there's a tremendous book in that, what a sci-fi book that'd make, Meccy.
It would be fantastic.
If all the electrons decided, that's it, we're not providing the human race with any more power, do you know the first people we'd be seeking to understand what we could do and how we could live? That's the traditional custodians of the land.
Yeah.
They'd be the first people we'd turn to, and they're the first of our cultures to have been ignored, because we know better. Anyway, moving on. I don't want to get too dark already, just in the intro. Look, I know a lot of people have. What's that term, Meccy, that I'm missing here? That they don't want to hear about a news item anymore.
News fatigue. The news
fatigue. That's it.
Fatigue.
Yeah, so news fatigue on the old Rona, so the coronavirus or COVID or whatever you want to call it. Australia here is. We've got to. I'll tell you this. We've been offered vaccine freedom, Meccy. Does that make you feel good?
I'm freedomed. Actually, there's an interesting thing. The health minister for New South Wales, I listened to his...
Brad Hazzard?
Brad Hazzard. I listened to him yesterday. And by the way, our updates are going to end as of Monday in New South Wales. But what he said was this. He said, we will, get all these freedoms. And he shook his head. No. When we get back to a level of normality. So the thing is, it's all about semantics and the way things are positioned. So right now, it's like, oh yeah, look, we'll get our freedoms back. Hurrah! Look at us, it's Freedom Day. Blah blah. All that nonsense. And he said, and I really applaud him for it. But he said, no, we just need to get back to normal, to a level of normal. This is not freedom. It's just going back to the way we were. This is not something someone gives you because you've done such a good job. Good boy. Here's some freedom. Not at all.
But Meccy, I've got Stockholm syndrome right now. I sympathise for my captors.
I know, right? How about that?
I'm even falling in love with one of them there.
I think he likes me too. The problem here is that this is now going on for 2 years, everybody, right? So the problem that we have now is that a lot of people believe that this is a normal situation. Not actually actively believe, but they have come to accept certain.
That's right.
They act a certain way. That's not the case at all. This is not a normal situation. And my expectation is that once things are under control or whatever the case may be in the future, we will go back to very much the same kind of life we had before. All things being equal, if this thing ends, but the problem is that we've come to
sorry, that's my maniacal laughter.
I know we have come to think of this situation as, oh yeah, that's a good thing, and these protests they come from a place of deep dissatisfaction. people they aren't used to being locked up. Like, it's not a normal thing, but we are becoming more and more used to it. I want everybody that's listening to just take a step back and realize this is not a normal situation. We are not in a normal situation. I don't want anyone to think, oh yeah, being locked up is normal. Oh yeah, the government, taking away our right of freedom movement is normal. One other thing I need to say before I throw it back to you, Dave, is this. I've got friends in Europe, friends and family in Europe, friends and family in America, friends in Asia, Singapore specifically, etc., etc. And I can tell you that in my German friends, they went on holidays. One went to Malta for a couple of weeks, and one went to Greece for a couple of weeks. Yeah, and just so we're clear what that means is in Germany, the official infection rates daily are about 12 to 15,000. In Spain, or Malta or whatever, it's a similar situation. Greece, all over Europe. My family, or my wife's family from San Francisco Bay Area, went to Switzerland on holidays a few weeks ago. And in America, the infections are coming in at 171,000, or officially anyway, right, a day, and with about 2,000 people daily that pass away allegedly from this. So I want to be clear here that people are going around traveling, visiting other countries, visiting other continents, while the virus clearly is running rampant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being reported.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Whereas here in Australia, well, look, I don't want to downplay it. Don't get me wrong, but our numbers are nowhere near that. Anywhere near that.
And we're in the 1,500 cases per day.
Yeah,
in New South Wales,
specifically New South Wales, not Australia at large. And I can't go any further than 5 kilometers from my house unless I wish to incur a $5,000 fine.
That's right.
Now that's really, there's such a disconnect in the way that different jurisdictions, different countries are handling this. And that's why I maintain that most of the jurisdictions aren't read in on this. I still maintain this is a pandemic. I still maintain it served a purpose. It has served a purpose, and it is still serving the same purpose. We will see more and more changes coming through. Trust me on that one. And it's also distracting from other things. It's distracting from a catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's distracting from a president in the United States specifically that seems to be teetering.
Well, what about
on the brink of ineptness?
Yeah. Well, their southern border problem.
Oh.
Yeah, there are a lot of issues in the world right now, and I don't think the virus should be the primary story.
Agreed.
Yeah. Look, our cases are minimal. We're not going back to zero, not anytime soon anyhow. And the vaccination rates are exactly where the government wanted us to be. In fact, we're doing quite well now. By the end of the year, we may very well be, of the eligible population, highly vaccinated in the 80s or higher in percent. But remember, when you do a cross-section of any population, you've got, the 0 to 12-year-olds, you've got 12 to 16 or 12 to 15, 16 to 75, and then 75 to up to 120 years old, right? That's the biblical limit, the Sumerian limit. That's the limit of the gods. Not my specific god, but the Sumerian, alien creators. Anywho, the issue I think is important is that until they've allowed vaccinations from 0 to 12 or 11, there's going to be always a percentage of the population that can't be vaccinated. Now, the consideration here is that the numbers of eligible vaccinated people isn't the population itself. It's only a proportion less a sliver. So that's what we've got to expect. I think the same Brad Hazzard, Mecky, that I discovered one of his phrases from a news conference was cleansed from the internet. And maybe that's really, you've got to hear out one of our other shows to understand what that is. Maybe there is a a thing happening that people are read into above us, above the people, as we're talking governmental, where the mandate is to get people vaccinated as much as possible to avoid that other thing they're not telling us about. Maybe that's really the real thing that's happening on their level. But above that, how many does the planet stand to lose without that? They're the kinds of thoughts that are in my head, and because it sounds you don't know where I'm at because I can't really say it, but there's got to be something going on here. The caseloads and the case fatality rates, and I feel sorry for everyone who has passed away as a direct result or a subsequent comorbidity of the virus. And it is a real thing happening. And at the moment, I think globally we're still standing at 2.3% case fatality rate of those reported. But it hasn't. The coroner hasn't determined that the cause of death was the coronavirus. So all the numbers you see in all the global reporting, and maybe even locally in your own news, when you hear comorbidity, it's because another thing took them, right? It may, both things together combined in the person's death. One of the things, Becky, that I think is still kind of disturbing to me is the 26% of the numbers of people that are in ICU that are fully vaccinated. Now that lines up with the amount of protection that the vaccines say that they offer. I'm not saying you shouldn't get it. I'm actually fully vaccinated with the Pfizer. So the Pfizer one was on alpha was like 95%, and over time it drops down and can be after 6 months as lower than 80% or so. And even so, if it got to 70%, that's a 30% chance that I'll still end up in ICU, but hopefully I won't die, because so far fully vaccinated people aren't passing away from the Delta strain. All those numbers, all the percentages I just talked about were from the Alpha strain. And, as the new information is coming out and being published, Mickey and I are up to date. So just consider what that means to you.
Yeah. There's been a very interesting discussion in the chat room, and I just want to quickly talk to that. And then I also want to talk about...
Why don't you fight back was the one that I noted.
Correct. There's this very special weekend, of course, that this weekend is, and I want to spend a bit of time on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, the question or the consensus in the chat room is, I don't disagree, that people are protesting, they are fighting back. They're being tear gassed and rubber bulleted, etc., etc.
Yeah.
That is true. But I want to give you some numbers here. The vast majority of people are not protesting or standing up or whatever it might be, and I will give you my thoughts as to why that is. But also, it is clear to me that the protests are doomed to failure because of numbers. 1 million people allegedly marched in Tiananmen Square. 1 million people, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of people. It's a big square in Beijing. I don't know if you remember this, the Tiananmen Square. This is now, again, decades ago still. The Chinese still deny that it ever happened, which is funny. But there we are, right? 1 million people. And the impact it made on China was exactly zero.
Mm-hmm.
Zero. Because China had 1.2, 1.3 billion people at the time, so it's less than 0.1% of the whole population that weren't happy with something. The boiling point for people is reached when the vast majority stands up and says, hey, this far and no further. The only few times when this has happened, and I mentioned this last time, Haiti is the only successful example of a slave revolution ever. But they had enough. They stood up. They beat the slave owners, and then they beat the French army that came to suppress them. They beat those two. Right now they are eternally cursed for it. It seems to me, or they're certainly undergoing a lot of punishment from the corporate and hidden parasites. But that's a real thing. the French Revolution, things had to get really, 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 really bad in France before the people took up, took the right into their own hands. The American Revolution, which was all about, believe it or not, it was a currency issue, having the right to issue on currency. Forget Boston, forget the Tea Party, forget no taxation without representation. All of this was nonsense, right? This is the official story. In reality, and I do encourage you to do your own research, what the people were protesting was the fact that they couldn't issue their own currency anymore in the colonies. That's what brought about the Revolutionary Wars against the British. But again, it takes the vast majority of people, not the few. The few will never move a thing. We have had people camped out here in Australia and near Parliament House protesting, various different things. I know in the States it's similar. There's certain people that feel very strongly and they just camp out and they stay there forever. And in my mind, if you want to change something, that's what you have to do. But it's onesies and twosies. Onesies and twosies. The vast majority of people, for better or for worse, just don't care. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Recently, Afghanistan was, I guess, not evacuated or abandoned, if you will, by the Allied operation or expedition forces that had been there for 20 years.
I think abandoned is a good term.
Yeah, let's call it that. 20 years. And not just the Americans, the Germans, the French, the British, Australians, etc., they had been there for 20 years. 20 years. I'm not going to go into now whether they should have been there or not. That's not the point. However, what the point is that they had been there for such a long time, right? And the impact that made on Afghanistan was virtually zero. Nation building, creating a better future. For 20 years, girls had a better future. They had, had rights, women in general. That was all goodness. I'm not arguing that. But overall, the impact on the basic fundamental structure of Afghanistan was zero. Not my point, though. My point is this. There were a lot of people here in Australia, and they went to Facebook, and they were really upset about that. It's unconscionable that we should just abandon Afghanistan this way. I'm disgusted with the government. I'm disgusted with the US. I'm disgusted with this and the other and whatnot. So these were the comments on Facebook. And then I couldn't help myself. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? So see, you're hating the politicians that made you feel bad. Okay, that's your right. Fair enough. Off you go. But what are you going to do about it now? So you're disgusted personally. It seems to affect your personal life in such a way that you felt you had to talk about it. It's okay. That's good. I mean, we're a democracy. We should do that. Mm-hmm. But what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about it? What? And the answer is, of course, nothing. Because if we really wanted to do something about it, we would all organize and we would go out in the street and say this is wrong. And we would stay in the street until we had achieved our outcome. Occupy Wall Street, all of these movements, they were ultimately failures because people just couldn't be bothered. Our attention span deliberately has been reduced to 15 seconds. We are now living in a world where critical thinking is conspiracy thinking. Okay, if you question anything that diverges any which way from the official story, you will be deplatformed, you will be ignored at best, ridiculed, or you will disappear at worst. No one wants to hear anything about anything that upsets them, and if they do hear about it, then it's only for a little bit. Like I can be outraged, righteously outraged if something bad happens. Oh, Afghanistan, I'm righteously outraged. Look at me being outraged. I will voice my outrage in my.
I'll hit like.
Yes, I will voice my concerns and my righteous outrage on any platform I have, Facebook, Twitter, whatever they're called. In fact, they're completely old school. The funny thing is, the social networking tools that are being used by the really young ones, I didn't even know existed. But the TikTok, etc. Right? So, but the point is, it takes a lot for people to stand up and be counted, and you really, really have to push them out of their comfort zone. And right now, that's not what we're doing. For the most part, the people that have been out of their comfort zone for decades, right, or longer even, they're completely oppressed. They got nothing. They got nowhere to go. People like us, the middle classes, the upper classes, whatever it might be, the working classes even, because there's also the great unemployed. We're too comfortable. The Romans knew this, and this goes. I mean, it goes back further in history than that. All we want is bread and games. Bread and games. What it really means is all we want is to be fed, have a full belly.
That's right. Fed and happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy, entertained. Right. That's what we want. Entertainment. News content is the news content of the news has decreased so dramatically over the last few decades that you can't call it news anymore. It's infotainment. You're getting some information, and mostly you're being entertained. Right. This is the greatest crime television and I guess the internet to some extent have perpetrated on us. Nobody cares enough. Nobody. It is unbelievable. I mean, we have all of these things at our disposal, our fingertips. We're not making use. Do you know who makes use of the internet and social media? Criminal organizations.
Yeah.
They're right in front. They see the potential. They're going right in it. Well, look at us. We're using all of this stuff. Of course you are. Because you want to make money. You're smart, right? The criminals out there.
Do you know who else uses social media quite successfully? The governments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, do you know, Mekki, we've reached a point at which we're all now socially programmed. It used to occur hand in hand, government in advertising, government in television, promoting a message that was consistent across, newspaper, print, TV, even the movies. Everything was being allowed to get through, controlled. But now, in this uncontrolled style of social media, say the Facebooks, why are we all so darned compliant? Yeah, there's some outliers, Mekki. Those who decided to protest. But what was the outrage from the people who weren't protesting? They were outraged. They weren't indifferent. They weren't apathetic to the protest. Who cares? Let them protest. Suckers. They weren't doing that. They were all cringing in fear that we were going to get the virus from them, right?
Yeah.
And look at all those stupid people. And the comments were all negative comments. Not, go you exercise your democracy.
Yeah. But this is where we are, though. We are now. This is exactly the kind of not apathy. It's the kind of mindset. That's what it is. Fear, fear.
Oh, more fear.
Simple example. I grew up at a time when I would come home when the street lights go on. And in Germany, if in the northern hemisphere, in summer the light is still bright enough to read the newspaper by 10 p.m. Because the sun goes down later and the days are a lot longer, right? And the more you go to the Arctic Circle, the longer the days get. Anyway. But the point is that I would be out. I was before my brother was born, so 6, 7, 8 years old, out and about all day in summer. In winter, of course, not as late because the sun goes down at 5 already, so you come home earlier. But I was out by myself or with my friends without any adult supervision, and now we wouldn't even let our kids go around the block on their bike. Or it's like I let my kids go around the block on their bike, and then my neighbor said, "Are you sure?" Yeah. I mean, what are the odds? I mean, if society was really that bad, that there would be pedophiles on every street corner, then I would expect cops on every street corner as well. Because I mean, yes, it's a thing. It happens. Yes, it's a terrible thing, and we're now getting more recognition for it. But by the same token, we've become so fearful of doing anything. I mean, my mother-in-law, she's terrified of leaving her house now. Right? She's living by herself.
Yeah.
But she's all this. Oh, you get fined. The police will come after you. And she's an older woman, right? She takes this seriously from when the police or the government say something, right? Which is fair enough too. And I find it terrible that not just my mother-in-law, a lot of people, especially elderly people, are terrified to leave their house.
Well, I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare break the rules, and I'm not being facetious here. I would not dare. People are flaunting it, Mekki. They're on Bondi Beach, not getting fined. They're not getting fined.
Yeah. So look, it needs to. This is something that needs to be understood by our international listenership. Sydney is a city that's divided along very clear lines, much more clear in the past, but it's still, these divisions are still there. What you have is there's the northern beaches, the North Shore, right? And that's where fairly affluent people live. Then you've got the eastern suburbs. There's a lot of old money as well, and so affluent people yet again. Then you've got the southern suburbs, if you will, where it's well-to-do but a bit more working class. And then you've got the west, the southwest, and the outer west, which are very much, or traditionally at least, a blue collar. And it's really still felt today. And so when you hear these news reports coming out of Sydney that the southwest of Sydney is up in arms and they feel they're being treated differently, it's because they've always been treated or being viewed as different to the rest of Sydney, which is closer to the beach or more affluent or whatever the case may be. So it's a real thing.
There's certainly more money by the beach, Mackie, and it's a popular thing, and it's got more media coverage. But I wanted to say that one of my friends, I've written it into the chat room. One of my friends was talking about the Red Rooster line, and I joke like it's the 9- line. And on one side, where there are red roosters, on the other side there aren't any, and that's the eastern suburbs.
Yeah,
and it's definitely a demarcation line of different policing styles.
It is. There are different. I remember this. I grew up I was 19 when I came to Sydney, to Australia. I lived in the West for the first few years or so, and then I moved to the North Shore. I wanted to be closer to work, etc. It doesn't really matter why, but I moved there anyway, right? And it was very different. I mean, I went to nightclubs a lot. I even did some a little bit of security work. Anyway, the point is, I went to nightclubs, but in the West, nightclubs were very bouncer heavy. And the bouncers would be really aggressive, right? This was back in the 90s, 80s, 90s. And you move to the North Shore and North Sydney and even nightclubs there, and much more respectful and softly spoken. And because I guess there you never knew who you're talking to. This is maybe the son or daughter of a politician or a corporate big shot. Who knows, right? So the bouncers there were a lot more... a lot less aggressive than they were in the West. And that's a fact. Okay, I lived it. I've seen it. And that really translates through to the policing as well. Very much. Although over the years it has changed with the inclusion of a much more diverse police force, which includes many more ethnic minorities, which is a good thing. So that, you can effectively police the areas that you look after. But there's still this perception that the police is not your friend in the West. Right, and then they bring the military in. They didn't bring the military to Bondi.
They did not, no. And we've got, I think it's between 1,000 and 1,500 military on the streets at the moment, policing this. So, hey, Mackie, are we done with this?
Yes. I think
all right. So. Okay, cool. Because look, I wanted to say this. One of my favourite college humour clips got a bunch of hate when I posted it, and it's the I'm a Star Wars fan, and there's the crossover with Star Wars and the stormtroopers in the bar talking about the destruction of destruction of the Death Star, and one of them is saying an X-wing couldn't possibly have taken it down. It must have been it must have been something else. It's a conspiracy, and Darth Vader just happened to be flying about. He wasn't in there, right? And he survived, right? And it's very funny how it's obviously clearly written about the Twin Towers and the events of 9/11. And I don't want to anything that I say about this. I'm not belittling anybody. I'm not putting anyone down. I'm not all the things I'm not. I feel not apologetic because I had nothing to do with it, but I feel sorry for the people who had friends or relatives who have lost their lives in those events of that day. I remember Mackie and I were both in different houses watching the events unfold. I remember that, right? I remember watching it. I stayed up. I watched it. I was amazed, and I saw the live footage. And what exists now is, in footage-wise, was never kept. A lot of the footage was never kept. A lot of the statements were never kept. Some did, some didn't. But I want to say that from here on in, for the rest of this hour, for the 20 minutes we've got left, I want to just suggest to everyone we feel for those people. Nothing we say is going to be derogatory. Where I think the question still remains about the true events of that day. You know, why were the camera footages on top of the hotel and the gas station? Why were they never ever shown publicly? Why was, you know, the report never, you know, made totally public? There was parts that were redacted. They never addressed a bunch of topics. What happened to engineers and builders for truth? All of those things, all of those questions never got answered. And yet I got a ton of hate from those people who were saying that I was insensitive to the predicaments of that day, or some 20 years ago. And I thought it was, I mean, the question that I thought was important were the people that are so compliant now with all the lockdowns, everything. That's hypersensitive. I'm giving them some rope. They're in a position, Meki, of now authority, having heard the official narrative for 20 years, and we all feel awful about it. But and now we're not allowed to question it any longer. It's like the time length of being able to present a crime in a court has expired now. We're not allowed to ask any questions. We're only conspiracy nuts. We're deranged conspiracy people, right?
So
having to try and I'm going to hand you the mic. So you're not allowed to question it, coming from the people who I know were kind of, it doesn't matter, Dave. If you want to talk about that, I'll just, what do you got to say? Fine, I'll make up my own, I'll make my own decision on it. And now they're accusational. They come from a position of power, Meki.
I'm going to take a bit stronger stance than Dave on this one. And so no, this is my opinion only, so not Dave.
That's fine.
But the problem that I see is this. So yes, like Dave, my heart goes out to everybody who's ever lost anyone, especially in these actions which were heinous and horrendous, even more so because of the circumstances I think they were accompanied by. But this was a heinous act, irrespective of who committed it. Okay, a heinous act, and an innocent, almost 3,000 people passed away, and many, many more, hundreds of thousands of people died as a consequence in the ensuing 20-year war. But what I find distressing is that I don't think the true culprits have been apprehended. I don't think the true culprits are being exposed to any form of justice. The people that actually benefited and profited to the tune of billions and billions from this action, from this event, they have not been brought to justice. No one has seen justice there. Now, I want to raise a few facts. I'm not interested in conspiracy theory. I'm interested in conspiracy fact. Fact number one, there were no Afghanis on the plane. All, the exception of one person, they were all Saudis. Osama bin Laden was apprehended in Pakistan. The alleged mastermind by 9/11 was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Pakistani as well, and in custody now for 20 years. Now, if it's such an ironclad case, now if we're so sure that it was bin Laden and Sheikh Khalid Mohammed and it was the 19 hijackers, if this was all so ironclad, why is it that he hasn't been charged with anything yet? Why hasn't he been convicted of anything yet? He's been having his day in court for 20 years. 20. How is that possible? No trial date has been set, and none is anticipated anytime soon. How is that even conceivable? Why isn't that a big story? That this person who seems to be the mastermind allegedly, hasn't been convicted of this yet. So that's another fact. I will give you some more facts here, right? The collapse of the buildings on the day, right? In the history of the world, in the known or recent history of the world, there were 3 other buildings apart from 9/11 that collapsed due to fire. 3. They all toppled to the side, though. They didn't collapse in on themselves like a pancake. Okay, they toppled. No other building was destroyed by fire, and no building was destroyed by fire in the same manner as the 2 World Trade Center towers. In fact, there's been no building in the world that has collapsed at the speed of freefall, terminal velocity. Whereas the towers did. The towers collapsed in on themselves as though there was no resistance of anything. Let me explain this to you. So as you pancake a building, you know, the top collapses the floor underneath, and on it goes. But there is a
resistance,
a level of resistance. Yeah, exactly. There's a level of resistance that the collapse would encounter. Except these buildings didn't. They collapsed in free fall. That's actually physically impossible. It is physically impossible for buildings to do that. Now, they can do it if they're blown out. If each level is blown out just before it's pancaked, then yes, you can achieve free fall because there's no resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're told that didn't happen. Another fact is that we still don't know to this day what collapsed building 7.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? So building 7 was not hit by any debris, and the fire wasn't extensive, and there it was. It collapsed nonetheless.
It was also extinguished. Yeah, and it was only a minor office fire.
Yeah, and Larry Silverstein said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he ever since then has said, "Oh no, I just meant something else." He said, "Let's pull it." I told him, "Pull it." Now, pulling is a very specific term in demolition, which means let's go and
demo
fire the charges.
That's right.
Let's demo the building. Let's fire the charges, and off we go. And there's footage, video footage. You can look it up yourself.
Yep.
That shows plumes of debris exploding out of the windows just prior to the collapse of that floor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this is all.
I wanted to add, just for some detail, that the building had 80 columns, steel columns, rising from the sub-basement all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
And it's a steel skeleton, not exoskeleton building.
Yeah.
All 80 steel columns failed simultaneously.
Yeah.
Now that's a bit weird from a small office fire on the 4th and 5th floor.
Yeah. Even if you allow for the impact of the planes, even if you allow for the jet fuel fire, etc.
Sure.
If you allow for all of that, okay, so the steel was weakened, okay, understood. And yes, okay, a collapse is plausible, sure, but not the collapse that we saw for all of the buildings in question. So all the buildings, you know, Tower 1, Tower 2, Building 7, they collapsed in on themselves, as you would see in a perfectly timed and perfectly executed demolition. An act that you plan for months and months, and then you execute against when you can.
Mm-hmm.
Because the carnage, if these towers had collapsed naturally, in my opinion, the carnage in Manhattan would have been indescribable. Because imagine, these are massive structures, and they're falling over any which way. And there would have been, I reckon, the vast majority of downtown Manhattan would have been destroyed. It wasn't, because they collapsed in on themselves.
Mm. So that's why the architects and engineers for Truth were seeking just simple instruction so that they could design buildings that weren't going to fail.
Yeah.
And that discussion was shut down.
Yeah, it was. It was. There's another few facts I want to share with you because it's important to understand. Larry Silverstein, who held the lease on the World Trade Center 1 and 2, the towers,
mm-hmm.
the month before, he changed his insurance conditions. Now, ordinarily, in case of catastrophe or whatever, each tower was insured for $1 billion. So, you know, the tower was destroyed. Then, you know, the Larry Silverstein would get $1 billion each tower. The month before,
mm-hmm.
Larry Silverstein changed his policy in case of a terrorist attack. In case of a terrorist attack, the payout would be double.
Yep.
$2 billion per tower. Okay? Now, the airline or the airlines that were involved in the event, allegedly, saw themselves shorted just prior to the event. Shorted means, look, on the stock exchange,
you're betting that it's going to fall.
You're betting that the company's stock will fall rather than going, okay, this is really good stock. I invested in it because I think it'll grow. That's the normal. No, this is the opposite, right? You're saying, oh no, I think this company's going to fail. I think the share value is going to drop. Blah blah blah, whatever.
And the more it falls, the more profit.
Yeah. Funnily enough, it was the theme for the opening sequence in James Bond Casino Royale, the first one with Craig. What's his name?
Yes.
And Craig Stewart, Craig. Anyway, and he so there was a bomb. There's the accountant, played by Michael Madsen. I think Michael Madsen or Michael Madsen. Well, doesn't really matter. He had engaged the
Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig. Yeah, and the bad guy, Mick Madsen. Oh yeah, Mick Madsen. I think that's it. He had engaged the services of a bomber, of a terrorist, to blow up an airplane, and he bet all his money, the money that he was looking after for other criminals, on the fact that this airline company's stock would, in fact, go down. So he would make a huge amount of money. It's interesting that the James Bond film, which of course was filmed after the 9/11 event, would take that as a theme. Because that's exactly what happened on 9/11. People were betting against those airlines, and somebody made a lot of money. That's a fact. Did
you know that Larry Silverstein, in his argument, his plea with the insurance company, he pursued attempting to get 2 lots of that $2 billion payment because he said 2 planes hit.
Yes.
He tried to separate the attacks apart from each other and claim it twice.
Yes, and I think he didn't get that because it was frivolous. I think it was dismissed as frivolous. But so my problem is this, Dave. Okay, whether or not the U.S. government knew or initiated or whatever, I believe very strongly that some people or many people had prior knowledge of the attack, and I'm not just talking about the attackers. And they profited from it immensely, to the tune that you can't even imagine as a normal person. And not only that, the event itself set in motion so many different things that benefited so many different people in so many different ways that it would take another show to do it. We've done a show cycle on this.
Yeah,
but
we have.
The truth is that a lot of people benefited from 9/11. It brought about Patriot Act 1 and 2. It brought about the creation of the Office of Homeland Security, which was the first time that a government body of that size had been created since the FBI. It also brought about the pretext for the invasion of Afghanistan, and we've discussed this ad nauseum here on the show. I'm just going to go quickly say poppy crops, natural gas pipeline, Taliban wasn't playing ball anymore, etc., etc.
There's quite an amazing amount of profit in so many different regions, and when you only look at it at the surface, you just think all the other stuff doesn't connect, but it does all connect.
Yeah, and then of course it set the pretext for the invasion of Iraq.
That's right.
And the money that was made by Halliburton and others.
This
is funny because Cheney and Rumsfeld and all of the other guys are neck deep in with those corporates. I think Cheney was a CEO of Halliburton at some point. But the point is, they got these contracts for rebuilding Afghanistan, rebuilding Iraq, especially, without ever going to tender.
So they were no compete contracts.
It was just given. Hey Bob, you want this contract? Hey George, yeah, I'd love this contract. Another fact for you. Again, this has been mentioned to death. So Osama bin Laden is part of the bin Laden family, which is neck deep in with the Bush family. The bin Laden family, not Osama, but his family, bankrolled George W. Bush's first company, Arbusto Oil. Okay? They are so deep in each other's pockets, it's not funny. The only plane that was allowed to fly on September 12th was the bin Laden plane, taking the bin Ladens out of the U.S. to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Again, nobody invaded Pakistan, even though apparently, we got bin Laden there, and Sheikh Khalid is Pakistani. He was the mastermind, but Pakistan wasn't invaded. Not a single Afghani on the planes. Mostly Saudis. Did we invade Saudi Arabia? No, we did not invade Saudi Arabia. So these are facts, okay? I grieve that the people who were killed that day may never see justice.
Yeah,
never see justice.
So, if you question that the American government would never do that, remember that paper, Mickey, the invasion of Cuba excuse.
Of course, yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Where they actually said it's going to take...
Operation Northwoods. Yeah.
Yeah, Northwoods. It's going to take a really big event. We need a lot of buy-in from the people. So maybe if we, take out a basketball team and fly a plane into some, American landmark, maybe we can get enough buy-in.
Yeah. Look at Pearl Harbor. Look at the Reichstagsbrand. Look at the sinking of the Lusitania. Look at the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Yeah, they're all false flags.
There are historical precedents for these things happening. And people always say, oh, but my government would never do that. That's unthinkable, Mackie. You're crazy. So let's be very clear here. The government is not an abstract body that just exists in its own right as the ultimate ethical and moral arbiter. The government is people. And in fact, forget the government. The people in control you never see in government. Okay, the people in government are just people that are being manipulated by people in control.
Yes,
and the people in control couldn't care less about you or your family or others. 3,000 people killed for them in exchange for all the benefits they got. That's a great bargain. That's awesome. I mean, I get to redevelop Lower Manhattan. That's brilliant. Let's look at this from the point of view of these people, parasites, if you want. It's not how you and I look at the world. This is they don't think of it in terms of empathy or how can I be good to my fellow man. No. These are the people that would have nailed the nails into Jesus's hands and feet. Don't think of them as the nail drivers.
They could change all the laws after they did that too.
Yeah, it's
tighten
phenomenal.
Those laws up.
It's great, and not only that, the people wanted to feel more safe. They wanted to feel more secure.
Just remember, Mekhi, the narrative. The narrative just creates the fear where we beg for change to stop it from happening. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the cause, whether it's a virus or it's whatever someone's trying to spend some money.
But also ask yourself this: we all have natural tendencies. Like we're a certain way we are. I mean, it's just how we are. Some people can hide it, other people don't hide it. It doesn't really matter. But fundamentally we are who we are. Ask yourself who goes into organizations like the CIA, the NSA, even the police force. What are the motivations? Why do they do it? Why do people do this? Is it completely inconceivable that there might be less than stellar motives, less than honorable motives for people joining these organizations? Think about the power that you have, and ultimately it's about power. Wealth comes once you've got the power. It doesn't really matter. Wealth doesn't give you power; it gives you influence. But power is much more alluring for a lot of people. You want power; it's what you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So who are the people that are in charge? The police. Are the police really there to protect you? Well, for the most part, if that can be done, sure. But if a billionaire's son has an accident, causes someone's death because he was or she was driving under the influence, do you think they would be treated in the same way, in the same way that your son or daughter would be treated? No. Not even close.
There's the end of the first hour. We'll see you after a very short break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these short messages. This is Dave and Mekhi's Shiny Side Out.